let us welcome God. So,
What am I doing here? You just did all my sermon and everything, for crying out loud. Well, let's close in prayer. Yeah, Gord Baptist, that's my name, with the Fellowship of Evangelical Baptist Churches in Canada. I get eyes. Why do I feel like I'm in an episode of Interrogation Raw? I mean, it's just like I wasn't there. I didn't do it. Um, I don't get as much grief as my brother John. I don't know what my mom and dad were thinking. They're in glory now, so it's not an issue with them anymore. Well, first of all, greetings from our Fellowship National staff and our president, Steve Jones. I just want to call you guys out. Way to go, guys. Well done. You guys here. This is my second time here. I was actually here in October of 2022 doing some work here and speaking upstairs in a session that I did that I'm going to do again this afternoon. So you are not unknown to me, and it was great. I'm come from London, Ontario. Yeah, God bless you. Go ahead. Let's give the love, kids. Way to go. I love it. I love it. But the things that you do here, all kidding aside, the kids zone with the life groups, with your fusion youth, you got the Arabic ministry going on. I could hear them in the background there as I was out in the hallway. God bless you. And then the support that you do for our missionaries and chaplaincies. Thank you. Your works are known. Well done. And I just had a chance to meet with some people, schmoozing, kibitzing, and just had a wonderful time. Everybody was just so gracious and kind. Just a little thing about this whole fellowship thing. What is that all about? So there is something called this movement of the Fellowship of Evangelical Baptist Churches in Canada. There's like 518 churches. Greenbelt is a member of this. You are working along in preaching the gospel, making disciples, another 300 missionaries globally in 22 countries. You're also working along 162 chaplains in our airports and jails and nursing homes and hospitals to care for those, even in the streets with the marginalized and the disenfranchised. And we're working together to care for aid, international and local. You're part of this. You're part of this. And there's two levels. There's one level called regional. So think like the government, not too far, but think like the government of where you have federal and provincial. And so provincial would be regional. So we have like a region that does work and support, and there's a central hub of office, but it supports the region of the Pacific from the mountains on to the Pacific coast. And then there's the prairie provinces, and they articulated that as the prairie region. Works for me, okay? And that's Saskatchewan and Alberta, Manitoba. And then there's Ontario, central Ontario, where we have Ontario, but the English-speaking churches in Quebec across the river there. And then we have Quebec, otherwise known as ABEC. Can't do it English, got to do it en français, so ABEC. And then you have the Atlantic provinces. And so there's that regional issue. I represent the national. I represent the office that helps all of us support. It's not you guys accounting to us. We're accounting to you. I help support you folks in that range. I am what's called the advancement director. Now, I've been doing this for about 8 years. This is my 8th year. Prior to that, I came from financial services. And McNeil. When did you change your name? McNeil. McNeil kind of shared about some of it where I came from finance. I did not come from seminary. God orchestrated me to come here and to you today, coming from business, okay, from finances. I had 1,200 clients managing 20 million of their dollars to secure their standard of living. And now I help people assure his standard of giving. Play on words, but it really is true. I now help people by advancing God's kingdom raise funds. That's what I do. And for our ministries and our affiliates and for our churches. So for example, I help raise funds for our pastors and missionaries, helping oversee and giving engagement and advisement on their pension plan to secure retirement. When newly appointed chaplains and missionaries come, I help train them on how to engage with people in churches to help raise their support, to advance, to fulfill their calling in that regards. And I help support and raise funds for churches through something called our Fellowship Foundation. And Chris, you can go to slide 2 on this one if you want to go with that. And how we doing? Yeah, there we are. Okay. So a little bit about this, because this is my sweet spot. This was started in 2015, and basically it was orchestrated and created for the purpose of connecting God's people and their generosity and their financial resources to their sweet spots, I call, their passions within the fellowship and ministries. And they can give by either money, capital, scratch, okay, or they can give in what they call fixed assets. So that could be stocks, it could be segregated funds, mutual funds, some of you know what I'm talking about. It could be land, it could be art, it could be anything in that regards that has a market value and a giving value as well. There's another kind that's sort of my little bit of passion, and that is what's called legacy giving, what I like to call tithing through your will. And so what I do is I go and educate and conduct workshops on estate planning and giving. And I'm going to do that after this. There's a lunch and learn. You're welcome to and invited to come, where I talk about wills and power of attorneys and how to express it in giving. And I even do stuff like estate planning through a sidearm. We have a partnership called Advisors with Purpose, where we provide for free estate plans to help people get the sort of an idea of what they give and how that works out as well. Since I started, now going in my 8th year, God has harvested $24.6 million of legacy gifts to our fellowship ministries. 5.7 million right now. It just keeps growing. 5.7 million is going to our fellowship churches. Part of that's happening here as well, by the way. And you know, it's just amazing. We have churches that also invest in a sidearm of our investment portfolio through something called Canadian Asset Global Management. They do pensions and such, but they also do investing for us. So we got churches that deposit their money in with us. And then the growth that comes from that, they use it for their ministry. So like one church used it for providing residency for Ukrainian refugees. And another one used it for taking kids, inner city kids, to go to Christian summer camps and sponsor them. And another went, and they're using it for women's shelter, for battered women, and support them as well. You know, money, growth for God's kingdom in that regards. And then FAIR, which is Fellowship Aid for International Relief. You're familiar with that, where we come with campaign and appeals going to individuals. And I go to individuals and churches and share some certain concerns, or there's an issue, whether locally, but mostly globally, missions connected, of a need. Now, I gave a lot of like pop-ups here in departments and regions and such, but you want to know something? When it comes right down to it, people are giving not to icons or cubes, they're giving to people. They're giving to people in jails and hospitals and nursing homes. Through chaplaincy, they're giving to provide health care in the most remote regions of the world where it's not available. Rescuing children and women from sex trade through our affiliation and partnership with International Justice Mission. Providing mental health support. Mental health issues in churches is the taboo. I speak on this. And we don't talk about this, but there is a growing issue regarding mental health and suicide. And we have a ministry called Agora Ministries. You should have their director come here and speak on this. And we provide that, so it's going there. Education for our Bible schools and our seminaries. Making disciples across the nation. So when I do what I do, because I'm call advancement director, what I do, it advances God's kingdom in the work that I do. I'm going to share with you this morning a topic that is not a popular one to preach over the pulpit. My dad was in ministry for 60 years some odd, fellowship churches. He's in glory now. I remember as a preacher's kid. Any preacher's kids here today? Amen. God bless you. Enough said. Okay. My dad used to say, if you ever want to leave a congregation ridden with guilt, all you had to do is preach on parenting and offering. You can laugh. Chuck Swindoll, in his book, The Grace Awakening, he states that when it comes to the topic of giving over pulpits, he says, quote, you could almost hear the groans and feel the sighs from the congregation. And he elaborates there's three basic reasons. Number one, it seems terribly repetitive. We've heard this before. Really? It's often commercialized. Number two, presented in a way that's almost marketed or sold. Or number three, it can be perceived as a hidden agenda. I want to assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that what I'm going to share with you today would be a message that presents it from a different perspective. No pitch, no sales, no marketing, no agenda. And I would trust that it would be an encouragement to you all. I am also involved in a couple of secular organizations called the Canadian Association of Give Planners and the Association of Fundraising Professionals. These are associations that train fundraisers hired by their nonprofit organizations and giving them details and training on how to go and raise funds. Raising funds is a huge business, and charities get a piece of that in the form of service fees. Now, the best I can give you are these stats from 2022, and they relate to 2019. So bear with me, but these are the hottest that I can give you. According to Statistics Canada, $4.8 billion in charitable receipts were submitted to Canadian taxpayers. This is according to Generosity Index report. In 2019, Canadians gave 0.53% of their aggregate income. What does that mean? So think about all the income that you would receive from working, from investing, from wherever sources. We give just slightly above 0.5% of that income per year to charity. The United States give twice that amount. Major giving, major giving comes from two sources: the rich, the affluent, and people of faith, active in their faith. What is active in their faith? If you attend this service, and all those who attend their services once a week, they're active in their faith. That's the definition of that, according to Heritage Canada. Now, fundraisers engage in society to give, and there are some ways that are taught in the industry by these secular industries. I'm going to give you 5 of them this morning. First of all, under duress, or otherwise known as, and this is their words I heard, generosity by guilt. Not my words, their words. Where you're feeling guilt-driven to give. There's a shaming. So have you ever seen campaigns where they show homeless or the disenfranchised or the oppressed, and you're in the supper hour and you're eating and you see that? Or particularly during Christmas or times of giving like Thanksgiving, and they strategically target it for that purpose, to give you the idea of giving. If there's an employment that has a campaign for generosity for, let's say, United Way or something of that nature, well, they'll pit people against people. You're going to let those people or that team beat you, and so on and so forth. So there's a kind of, guilt push kind of thing. Some call it pressure from pulpits if you have some churches, not present company excluded, okay? But there's that kind of technique as well. There's another kind called ritual or ordered, where they strategically time their campaigns, especially if they're aligned with a religion or tradition, to go and have a campaign appeal during their time of generosity, like the zakats, the zakats for the Muslims, or the dinars for the Hindus, or the zakat hadins for the Judaism. They just make sure that it's timed. Oh, they're going to give. Let's go and set it up that we have our appeals during that time. There's a third kind called neuromarketing, and I've got an example of it, Chris, if you want to show that slide next, where they go, it's a form of solicitation that induces people to give using more psychologically suggestive techniques, where they're going to go and they're trying to encourage the secretion of, got to be so careful with this word, oxytocin. I'm dyslexic, and I kind of want to say Oxycontin, and that's a whole different chemical altogether, okay? Whether it's a state of well-being, reducing the inhibitions. They'll even Photoshop in some of their campaigns a number on the screen or on the TV, and that number has been Photoshopped in there strategically to get you to think this is the number we want you to think of when we want you to give on a regular basis. Really interesting stuff, in that regards. Next slide, Chris. So going back, recognition. How many times have you been to a university or hospital and you saw somebody's name on it, right? Okay, recognition. A name on a plaque, a name on a wing where they gave, you gave, here you go, here's your. Have you ever seen those photo ops with that great big huge check and 2 people signing the check with a thyroid condition, I call it, where it's just huge. Well, it's promotion, right? You give, we're going to promote you, we're going to recognize you in public. And then there's the compensation kind. We have a campaign right now in London where it's for the hospital. You buy a ticket, I think it's for $100. It gives you a chance to win a house. Okay? In that regards. You give, we're going to give you something back of potential. And it can be something as simple as that, grand as that, $1 million. Or it can be something as simple as you give, and here's a box of Girl Scout cookies. I get kids that come to my neighborhood because they know I'm an easy touch, because they come and they say, hi, would you mind supporting our school? And for $2, we'll give you these chocolate-covered almonds. And I say, how many crates do you have? Because I'm a chocolate-covered almond. They know me. They're strategic in that regards. You give and you get something back. One might argue, well, is that a problem? And you know what? No. I mean, look at the good that they do, and that's it. And some ministries do some of the same thing, When I look, however, at the biblical examples of what I read and the instructions on giving, I see a different description and style, a disconnect. And so I just want to share some of this with you this morning. First of all, for examples, I'm going to give you a first example in Exodus chapter 25. And I'll put it on the screen for you. Let me give you the story here. So here is God speaking to Moses to create and build the tabernacle, a place that he can worship with his people. And I read in Exodus 25, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, that they may bring me an offering of every man that giveth it willingly with his heart. And ye shall take my offering, and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle, after the pattern of the instruments thereof, even so shall ye make it. So this was a calling of the treasures the people had in their possessions, probably most likely the spoils of Egypt, because that's what they had when they left Egypt to go to the promised land. And it was done freely. Did you notice the phrase that giveth it willingly in his heart? In the NIV, it's as the heart prompted. And how did the people respond? Well, we read in Exodus 36:3, they received from Moses all the offerings, the collectors, other offerings the Israelites had brought to carry out their work and constructing the sanctuary. And the people continued to bring free will offerings morning after morning. And then the collectors came to Moses and said, the people, because they kept on giving and giving and giving, the people are bringing more than enough to do the work the Lord hath commanded to be done. So much so were they giving that Moses had to give an order. And so we read in verse 6, and they sent his word throughout the camp. No man or woman is to make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. And so the people were restrained. Can you check this out? The people were restrained from giving. Please do not give. Who's your treasurer here? Can you imagine him saying that? Can you imagine the board saying, yeah, please, look, we got enough. Enough already, okay? Stop giving. That was one example. Let's go a couple of centuries ahead. We're going to David now. David wants to build a temple. No more this nomadic place, this tent. He wants to build a temple, a fixed edifice to worship and to house the altar. Excuse me. And so he goes to God in 2 Samuel 7, and God says, no, David, not you. Your lineage, Solomon, yes, but not you. You'd ask, like, why? What's wrong with that? Well, he gives the answer. In 1 Chronicles 28:3, he said, but God, this is David speaking, God said to me, you are not to build a house for my name because you are a warrior. You have shed blood. Nothing against you, David, but you got dirty hands. I just want clean hands, bloodless hands. And God is sovereign. God's will be done. So he can't build us, right? But at least he can set up the stock, the inventory, to prepare to build for this place. And that's what he does. We read in 1 Chronicles 29:3, moreover, this is his words. Check this out. Moreover, because I have checked these words, I have set my affection. That's significant because it's not like, all right, check off this box when it's done. This was a love affair. This was a love affair to give. He says, I have set my affection to the house of my God. I have of my own proper good of gold and silver, which I've given to the house of my God over and above. Not only did he have a plan to give originally, but he just kept on giving. He went over above. I have prepared for the holy house. He put his money where his mouth was. But then he said, think anybody else might want to do this? And so we read in verse 5, just one line. And who then is willing to consecrate his service this day unto the Lord? It's not a choreographed sales pitch. There's no marketing, no manipulation, no pitching, whatever. Just that one line. What's the response? Well, it starts at the top. In verse 6, we read, Then the chief of the fathers, the princes of the tribes of Israel, the captains of thousands and of hundreds with the rulers of the king's work, offered willingly. Offered willingly. That's significant. Then it goes viral. It goes contagious, because then we read in verse 9, Then the people rejoiced, for they offered willingly. Because of the perfect heart they offered willingly and to the Lord. And David the king also rejoiced with great joy. Note, offered willingly and rejoiced when they did it. They gave because they recognized this. Verse 11, Thine, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. For all that is in heaven and earth is thine. Thine is the kingdom, O Lord, and thou art exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come from thee, and thou reignest over all. In thy hand is power and might, and in thy hand it is to make great and to give strength to all. Why am I making a point about this? So there's going to be a pop quiz, okay? I like intergate. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, hello. I should move this over here, but then the lights, you can't see me. So there's 3 principles, God's principles of finances, and I want you to remember this morning. Here's the first one. God owns it all. It's not your stuff. God owns it all, and we are his stewards. So I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that, number 1, all right? So I've given you some examples of giving. Now I'm going to give you some attitudes towards giving, okay? Christ said in Matthew 6, 3 and 4, But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. That's a metaphor, not a literal. So much so, think of it as like your left hand doesn't know what your right hand's doing. The point is, thine alms may be done in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward you openly. He also writes in Proverbs 3, verse 9, Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Does anybody remember the book, The Wealthy Barber? Oh, yeah, okay, great, oh, good. David Chilton. And, of course, his follow-up book, The Wealthy Barber, Volume 2. Must have worked really hard for that title. I'm a little nasty this morning, ain't I? I'm sorry. I should have prayed before this. God, be with me. I did pray a lot this morning in my hotel at 2 o'clock in the morning. God. What did he say was the number one rule to get rich? Say it out loud. Pay yourself first. Right. Before you pay any bills, pay yourself first. Put a sub portion aside. What does that say? Pay who first? Not just the table scraps, the first fruits. That goes to God in this case. All right? Now, if I gave you these, did you notice something here? Do you remember those 5 examples of how the world gives? And these examples and attitudes of how God instructs us to give? Does anybody see like, oh yeah, they're like hooked to the side. They're like, no. They're not. They're totally different. God's standard of giving is you're ready to give. There's enjoyment. There's no guilt. There's no conditions, no payback. It's done in secret. There's none of that. There's none of that. You love to give. You look at your surplus and saying, well, that's not for me, that's for God, because that belongs to God. And when they give, there's no conditions attached. Do you understand what I mean? That when they give, it's like, okay, I'm going to give, and it shouldn't be done in the church, because I've heard this before. I'm giving, but you better make sure you do ministry this way that I like. Do not play that game. That is not what you want to stand before God and have that in your resume or CV. Okay? Don't do it. You give, hands off. It belongs to God anyways, in that regards. All right? Watch out for that. So you would think, Larry Burkett says there are 2,000 verses about money and money issues, 400 on faith and sin. So God knows where our heart is. You would think with all this stuff and this richness that we have about money and finances, that giving would not be a problem. And yet, interesting enough, in our secular nonprofits and in our churches, we're finding that giving is down. Not only givers are not giving, the number of givers are down, and the amount of giving is down. Remember I told you that it was 0.53% that was giving? 5 years ago, it was 1.7%. That it was 4.8 billion in charitable receipts. It was 10 billion before COVID. In 1990, 30% of Canadian taxpayers claimed donations, charitable receipts. In 2019, and I'll bet you it's even lower today, because I'm hearing it from different sources, but the best I got, 2019, it's gone from 30 now to 19. Now, why is this happening? Well, first of all, givers die. Duh. Okay? Givers die. But those that have a heart, they've made a provision in their wills to go and say, you know what? When I'm in the ground, I still want money to go to God's kingdom. And they're giving beyond the grave. We talk about that this afternoon. Come and join me. All right? But there's also less and less amounts giving. Givers die, number one. Number two, why are less people giving while they're alive? Well, first of all, or not at all. Well, first of all, it's not part of their expenses. They don't put in their budget. They don't think about it. It's not part of their regular routine of giving. If you actually even suggest it, there's a pushback. And churches, present company excluded, don't talk about this over the pulpit. I've gone to pastors and I said, would you mind, I'm willing to talk about this. And some of them have said to me, fellowship pastors have said to me, good, because it takes the target off my back. You know, it's a touchy subject. I like preaching touchy subjects. I do. I just enjoy it. Not out of sake of shock value or some sort of sadistic kind of thing, but it's just, I like to talk about stuff that people don't like to talk about in that regards. Then there's the issue of budget constraints. Have you ever heard of something called inflation? You like the gas prices that you're paying right now? I came from Vancouver 2 weeks ago. Price of gas there is $2 a liter plus. Whew. Inflation is really kicking it, man. You got others that are disabled. There are those who are saddled with what I call financial bondage or excessive debt. Just want to talk about this for a moment. This is kind of like my background thing. According to BDO Canada, it's an investment firm. You ever heard of them? Okay, recent statistics, check this out. 40% of Canadians have over $200,000 in debt outside their mortgage, consumer debt. Yeah, wow. Greatest portion is among the millennials and the Gen Xers, the 28 to 49, 50-ish demographic. Interest rates have risen. Some of you guys and gals are going to have a mortgage renewal coming up. There's going to be an increase in payments. Now, why do this group gets into debt? They found out that They will spend, and I think this is like so conservative, but apparently you will spend 3 hours a day on social media. X, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, maybe. But particularly Facebook, Meta, X, they'll see their friends have a better time than they are. Right? So in order to have a good time that they can post, they'll go and they'll buy stuff that they don't have the money for to outdo or equal or show, yeah, I'm having a good time. Did you know that you will spend 20% more using credit than you would if it was cash or debit? It's just so easy to do, and it just leads them to ruin. This is nothing new, because thousands of years ago, Solomon wrote, "He who loves pleasure will become poor. Whoever loves wine and oil will never be rich." Now, guess what? Seniors. Oh, here we go. People 65 and older, fossils like me, baby boomers and civics. Stats Canada, the average debt for us, for that group, is $105,000. Seniors, average debt is $105,000. The average mortgage is $153,000. 5 years ago, it was $30,000. Now, why do you suppose that is? Do you think they go on Instagram and they say, "Oh, look at Ruth. Look at the walker she's got. Ooh. I got about me do that. Tim, oh, he's got a hip replacement. Oh, yeah." See how fast you are, because I ask this question in every church that I speak on this. See how fast you get it. There are two reasons why seniors get into debt. What is the number one reason why they get into debt? Anybody? Oh, I heard it. What was it? Children. Are we talking about Timmy and Susie that need hockey equipment and braces? No, we're talking about Tim and Susan that are adults and they've had a failed marriage or a failed business. And they borrow and they borrow and they borrow. I had one lady, a client of mine, her husband left her very well comfortable, home completely paid off, pension, life income fund, registered retirement income fund, pension, money. She was set. And the moment dad died, one goes, "Mom, can I have 10,000? Borrow 10,000 for a new car. Mom, can I borrow 10,000 for braces? Mom, can I borrow? Can I borrow? Can I borrow? Can I borrow?" And they borrowed and they borrowed and they borrowed and they did not pay it back. And at the end, before I left, she declared bankruptcy. She lost her house, and she's on government assistance, CPP, old age security, and government GIS, government assistance. Yeah, wow. Just because they just could not say no. Second reason, and please, this is not to, and by the way, I support my adult kids when it's necessary. I don't mind giving while I'm living, but none of this. Trust me, I'm not Mr. Moneybucks. I'm not sugar daddy. My wife calls me sugar daddy. Not my kids, okay? I miss her this morning, okay? Yeah. She's spending money right now. I'm gone, okay? Do you know how I keep track of my wife? I'm sorry, I'm going off base here. Do you know how I keep track of my wife when she goes out? I'll watch my bank account. Oh, that's where she's at. Okay. Okay, I've got about 28 minutes to go. I better shut up and get going. The second number one reason is divorce. Divorce, gray divorce. Did you know the highest number or sector of gray divorce is people 60 to 65, 430,000 divorced people in Canada. Highest age demographic going through that. I'm not saying that credit is bad. Don't get me wrong, there's good credit. It's when you're going way overboard on this one. So I just want to share that with you, okay? You're not alone. All right, examples I've given you. I've given you attitude. Attitudes on giving. And now some instruction. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, 6-9 starts out, "But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall also reap sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall also reap bountifully. What are we talking about here? We talk about agriculture or investing. Next verse tells it. Every man according to as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that ye always having all sufficiency in all things may abound to every good work. I want you to go to verse 7 there, where it says, every man according as he purposes in his heart. The Greek word means to prefer, to propose. NIV says each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give. It's no different than what the people did in Exodus when they were giving to the tabernacle. Offered willingly, giveth willingly with the heart. So here's the thing. How much should we give? How much should we give? What is the standard that we save to that question? 10%. The word tithe means a tenth, right? It does. Now, for some of you, 10%? Yeah, doing it. For others of you, that's entry level. For some of you, it's like, no, we're not there. As a man purposes in his heart. He's a troublemaker, isn't he? Is he the board elder? Yeah, you can smell him a mile away, can't you? They got that odor. It's just like, oh yeah, there it is. Thank you, brother. That's fine. Some of you, when I say 10% right now, are going, are you kidding me? For real? Have you seen my budget? Are you insane? That ain't gonna happen. Like my brother, the elder, Baptists like to set spiritual quotas. Some of you in the 60s growing up, you may remember that we were judged by how long our hair was and how short our skirt was. Hair too long, skirt too short. Some of it's in our giving, judging on the basis of our charitable receipt. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, for the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh at the outward appearance, God looketh on the heart. So 10%, yeah, but not everyone is able to do so. Not right now, particularly with family obligations and debt. But remember this, it's not aptitude that God judges and knows and wants. It's your heart. It's attitude. So if you're in debt, there's plenty of resources to go through. Canadians Against Poverty, Larry Burkett, Dave Ramsey, Tom Copeland, just around the Toronto area. Great resources. I even go to churches. I'll come back again. I love Ottawa. Not the 8-hour drive, but I love Ottawa, okay? I love coming. I love this church. I'll come back here. I'll do a whole workshop for a couple hours on how to get out of debt. That's my background, okay? And one of the first things we talk about is stop impulse buying. Will Rogers, the great soothsayer, used to say that impulse buying was buying things you don't need with the money you don't have to impress the people you don't necessarily like. Root causes of that. We set up a budget, working with that. Getting that monkey of debt off your back where you're going from a cash instead of a debt if there's something that you need to buy. And while you're doing this, you're praying. Prayer is an essential part of this. And when you're getting this off your back and you're getting surplus, you develop a lifestyle that is so freeing. And that's true financial freedom. When I was in the industry years ago, London Life used to have a marketing phrase, Freedom 55. Then it got Freedom 65. Now it's, what's London Life? Seriously, it's gone. Okay? Um, you look at your wealth, you look at what God's given you, not just the surplus, whatever, anything. You're looking at it and going, God, what can I do to serve? How can I serve you with this? And when you start giving, you give to start here, the local church. You start here, supporting your local church. Nobody asked me to say those words, by the way. This is me talk, okay? You start with the local church. Christ said it best. He said, it's more blessed to give than to receive, okay? So some of you may say, okay, Gord, but I can only give $10. That's all I got. Right now, you want to be on $10. It's $10. You're starting, not staying. You're starting. Because when you start doing this and you're starting to get, I want to honor you, God, and I need to get this, my life in order, and I need to get my budget in order, and I need to really steward what you've given me. You'll find the surplus grow. And next thing you know, it's $20. And you're giving. And then systematically 100. Then it goes to 1% as the surplus grows. 2%, 5%, 8%, 10%, 12%, 15%. As high as God has orchestrated, as high as your heart wants to go. Go and enjoy it. Have a ball with this. And every day and every time that you're making whatever you're doing, you do it with prayer, which is the second of God's principles in finances. Pray. What was the first one, class? Remember? What was my first? Already? Yes? There you see. You get a smiley face. That'll creep him out for the rest of the Pray in everything when it comes to financial. Don't try to do it on your own. When you invest, when you buy, when you sell, when you have should we buy this, God? Pray. Let God open or close the doors. You can't make a mistake. Trust me. If you really are focusing on God. Have you had your tax credit back yet? I'm sure you haven't. You probably paid. But have you had your tax credit back yet? Yeah. What about that? I'm not fishing here, but I'm just saying, a portion. Whatever the case may be. Stop looking at self-impulses. Giving willingly from the heart. I'm going to close off now, guys. I'm going to get to the closing stage here, okay? I came from the world where people were consumed with money. Not just people of the world, but pastors as well. Some of them too. Like, dude, really? Where they were consumed and still are. Will I have enough money to live off until retirement? They were so worried about it. When I would go and review my client's investment portfolio, there were 3 things they wanted to know. What's my rate of return? What are my fees? And how do I keep it from the government? That was it. And they would lose sleep over it. I had people that didn't have money, and all of a sudden they had a huge amount of money, and all of a sudden it was like the worst thing they ever got in their life. This is This is financial freedom? No. No, it's not. When you trust in your money in your portfolio, that's a problem. We're not called to be like that. We're called to be counterculture. In 1 John 2:15, it says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If anyone love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. God is sovereign, not our wealth. Our wealth belongs, thank you, God. God bless you. Our wealth belongs to God. I keep on saying this, but I can't help it. Success is not in how big your home is. I was in many a mansion or a house, and the people inside were homeless because it was just staged, and you could just cut the tension in the air. Not always, but more often than necessary. And I would be in subsidized housing, and it's like a warm hug, Not always, but you understand there's a disconnect in that regards there too. When we see things, the treasures of the earth, as God calls it, that that can rust and that can be stolen and rotted, God says, look at the treasures. Pursue the treasures of heaven. What are the treasures of heaven? Righteousness and justice and mercy, leading people to Christ. That's the stuff you can't buy, that can't be stolen. That's the stuff that we want to identify ourselves with. And then many are not doing it, and that's the lost blessing. That's the purpose of this sermon, giving the lost blessing. And I want to have you to think about that. So the first principle was, again, right on. What's the second principle? Pray in all things. Third principle, we're circling back, give. 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 If you're giving, well done. God knows. You may be doing it in secret. For those of you that can't because of unemployment and disability, pray about that. I shared that line with a church, and one person came that was disabled and said, I still give. I give, not a lot, but I give, right? As the heart proposes. Aptitude. No, it's attitude. God sees the heart. One person came to me after saying about poverty, giving. No. He said, you know what? I go to countries where the standard of living is so less than Canada. The average income in Canada is $55,000, $58,000. The average income, this person came from Congo, one of the richest dirt in the world. And the average income in the Congo is $1,000 Canadian per year. And they're saying poverty is no excuse for generosity. They're saying it. You know. So if you can't give, work on it. But while you're doing that, is there something you can do, give of your time? Is there something you can do in this church? Can you do that too, you know? Can you start there as well? Don't forget that. Then there's one other thing. I'm going over time. Sorry, you're going to have to put up with me. Give of your time to God. Now, what do I mean by that? Spend time meditating on His Word. Set some time to get to know God by meditating on His Word. Psalms 1:1-2 says, but His delight is in the law of the Lord, and in His law doth He meditate day and night. Psalm 119:11-12 says, thy word I've hid in my heart. You know that verse. Thy word I've hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee. Blessed art thou, O Lord. Teach me thy statutes. I'm going to tell you something. Don't think that when I shared all this stuff with you that I had my ducks in a row day one. I didn't. Do you know who are the worst that tell but don't walk when it comes to finances and stuff like this? Our financial advisors. Ever heard of Bernie Madoff? Yeah. There's one guy in our company, very successful, but he was doing things not right. The company went to him and said, you got to knock that off. And he said, basically, you, okay? He left the company, set up his own office downtown in Toronto, Bay Street, building portfolios, millions of dollars. Years later, I heard on the news there was an extradition for him to be brought back from the States to Canada because he had embezzled a couple of $1 million of his clients. He didn't make it because they found him hung in his cell. Okay? All right? So, focus on God's word. I'm not the same person that I used to be. Praise God. You heard about the expression living paycheck to paycheck? I lived overdraft to overdraft because I didn't follow my own principles. My wife finally said, do a budget. I got a budget. It's in here. I said, no, on paper. And when I started doing this and when I started reading God's word, my heart changed. I am not the same person I used to be. I'm not that Baptist that I used to be. Judgmental, pharisaical. I look at people in pain and it says, that's pain on legs. Before it was like, why don't you apply yourself? You need Jesus. How cruel is that, eh? How uncompassionate is that? God challenges us with this. This is the harshest language, but it is really God speaking. Malachi 3:8-10. Will you rob God? Yet you rob me. But how? How do we rob you? In tithes and offerings. He says, You're under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you are robbing me. Bring me the whole tithe in the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this. You can test God in this. Test me in this, and see if I will not pour open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. Some of you may say, here it comes, prosperity preaching. Yeah, I got you. I give and God's going to give me money back. No, but not no. But there's blessing, peace of mind, joy, freedom, stuff the money can't buy. A generous man will prosper, but he who refreshes others will himself be fresh. So, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Start. Just start. And secondly, stop. We talked about robbing God. Stop robbing yourself. Enjoy this journey. It's beautiful. It's a thrill. Have just a wonderful time. I've gone 5 minutes over and 51 seconds, 52, 53, 54. Okay. I'm done. Let's pray. Holy Father, thank you for this wonderful flock, God. Pray for Kevin today as he's preaching in Alta Vista, Lord, that you would also orchestrate his mouth, and for all pastors that are preaching. But God, thank you for helping me. You answered my prayer this morning. And God, these are great people. Just awesome. And may they be inspired by what has happened today. Maybe those that aren't giving, that they may be starting to give, God, and do that and just enjoy the beauty of it. For those that would like to give, but they can't, that they may look at themselves and look at their situation and say, yeah, let's work with God. Let's pray, and let's just fulfill this beautiful desire to give, God, in whatever ways we can do, whether it's capital or just time, God. But more importantly, we need to spend time with you as well, God. And so, Lord, bless these people. Lord, whatever that came out of the pulpit today, my hope and prayer is that it's all to the praise of your name and the glory of you and the advancement of your kingdom. For it's in your holy name I do pray. Amen. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.